Here at the Invite Invasive Species to Fund Their Own Removal workshop with Michael Bald. Before we get started, I have a few reminders for you. My name is Paul Bertler. I'm your host for tonight, and I am with NOFA Massachusetts. I'm a board member as well as a volunteer. Let's see. We, of course, have a few sponsors who help make our summer conference possible. If I can pull them up. Our sponsors help make the conference possible. If you're able to support them at all, I encourage you to do so. Waiting on my screen to advance. Which it's not wanting to. Here we go. All right. For those of you who have joined us in years past in person at our summer conference, one of the highlights is always our vendors, and I'm excited to say our vendors this year have joined us virtually, and there is a link on the program book as well as the website to check out our vendors. So I encourage you to show your support to them as well. Another highlight of the summer conference for me is the teacup raffle, and I'm excited to say we also have our virtual teacup raffle. So lots of great items that you can have a chance to win and help support NOFA at the same time. We want to make sure that if you have any questions, that they get answered. I want to encourage you to use the chat feature for questions or comments, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the presentation. And I may interject when appropriate for Michael to respond. And then we'll also have time at the end of the workshop for any follow-up questions as well. The account is set to mute you, so please unmute yourself before speaking and mute yourself again when you're done to avoid any disruption. This session will also be recorded, so you'll have access to it after the fact. We are presenting, attending, and hosting this workshop from land that was managed and inhabited before European colonization. Please take a moment to find your location on the map and honor those whose land you now occupy. For those of you from outside New England, this map can be found online at native-land.ca, and I encourage you to check it out. And now, my distinguished guests, I am pleased to introduce Michael Bald. Michael's the founder of Got Weeds in central Vermont, and has, I don't know how many times he's presented with NOFA in the summer conference, but I know this is not his first time. So we look forward to, thank you for taking the time tonight and joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you. So Michael, please take it away.
Thank you, Paul. I just want to share with folks, I'm having a tough time hearing volume, receiving volume, but I think we'll be okay if you all can hear me. So I'll just give Paul a chance here. Just give a thumbs. We're good? Okay.
I can hear you loud and clear.
I may just need you to just flag me visually if you need a question or something like that. Okay. Other than that, I think we're set. Okay. Okay. Thank you again, Paul. Thank you for attending. Those of you who are online, I look forward to visiting a lot of the sessions once the growing season slows down. I know I haven't been able to zip through, haven't even made it through the whole natural farmer yet. But anyway, that's what we do when the growing season slows down. So I'm Mike. I'm the owner and founder of Got Weeds. I always enjoy the summer conference. I miss the conference in person there at Northampton, or well, basically just say at Hampshire College, regardless of where it's been hosted. So I miss your all's company, but glad we can at least connect. And I know a lot of hard work was done to do this. So I want to say thank you again. If this is the model we're going to go with, I'm glad to learn that and appreciate all the hard work. I also have a kind friend hosting me and supporting me this evening in some of my invasive species activities. So some nice tolerance there that I just want to appreciate. I won't name names, but my work certainly is not me acting alone. There's a lot of people behind me, hiring me, supporting me, embracing the work, and doing similar work. So that said, I think that's an introduction. So I'm just going to try to move my slides here to the next one. Make sure I can do that. And we're good with, we moved ahead to slide 2. Okay, great. Perfect. So this is my goal today, really, is to address the question of invasive species. Not that issue. What is invasive and who's making the judgment call, or what's that about? What are the pros and cons? We're not going to have really that conversation. I really wanted to dive into if we decide a species of plant, this is a plant session, if a particular species is inconvenient or economically injurious to us, or perhaps it's ecologically devastating or high impact, we need to do some control, some treatment, some management. How do we get past the financial obstacles that always seem to be part of the equation? So that's really what I'm here to try to walk through tonight. Certainly welcome questions, and Paul will pick those up and relay them to me, and we'll have time at the end. So that's kind of that's the gist, that's the core. I'm basically going to show you examples, ideas, and lead into kind of close out with the opportunities where I see that there's a lot of good business opportunities in the world of land management, the subset of that being invasive species management. And this is a big part of the recreation world and certainly the agricultural landscape. So I'll move on. Just wanted to show you, I'm certainly going to give examples, but ideas and opportunities are also part of the show. So I've just mentioned here, invasive species are a land management issue. Funding always seems to be, where do you get the money from? How long will the project take? Is it more than 1 year? Yes, it is. It's basically a constant. I mean, we always need to be managing our land. So we kind of need, in order to be a sustainable operation, we need to think of invasive species as an ongoing thing, just like maintaining a house, maintaining our own health. The funding is something we need to find and we need to commit to year after year at a certain base level. Okay. I know it's true that grant world tends to be maybe the launch concept, or the get an idea rolling and get it to the point where an idea can become sustainable. So I just wanted to mention those things about funding. It's always a challenge, and it needs to be, in order to keep things sustainable over the long term. My work is, I work with a non-native plant species with non-chemical methods over the long term. I'm not about results today. I help people transition their landscapes. So in that effort to transition landscapes and manage the invasive species we find, other challenges include labor. I hear this everywhere I go. Who's going to do the work, Mike? And I agree, that's a problem, and we need to find trained people who know how to work safely, or even, honestly, people who know how to work outside. And that might sound strange to say, but I've started doing presentations on how to work outside safely because people don't think about all the things we encounter, and some of it's related to the farm and to the garden, the home landscape. Some of it's related to woodlands, but we have to be able to do things safely so that our people that want to work outdoors can continue doing so. I think of one of the biggest safety challenges is certainly Lyme disease. I know that's relevant to everyone here in New England, where many of us are. So labor is a challenge. Training of the people is a challenge. Getting people to appreciate knowledge beyond the classroom or beyond the Zoom session, beyond the chalkboard. How do you apply it to the landscape or to your situation or to your place? Because applying the knowledge is certainly different from picking it up out of a book. And finally, I want to say that one challenge of managing landscapes is realizing that it's a dynamic setting. Climate change, global warming, that's one of the dynamic forces at play. But what's the seed germination rate going to be this year for this crop? Are we in a high water summer, or are we in extreme dry conditions? Maybe not quite a drought, but a lot of places are extreme dry, even with this last burst of water. So it's a shifting landscape. It's a very nuanced thing to manage lands, and we got to get it right. So I wanted to put those things out there. I'm sure some of you may have more to add to that, but we'll move on for here. What really got me wanting to do this presentation was seeing how much potential there is if we manage landscapes well. Invasive species, again, just being a subset of land management. There's so much positive we can do, so much potential in the world of health, climate change, positives in addressing climate change, food production to include the medicinals, and then just going deeper with human connection, finding meaning for our work, for what we do, and a sense of spirituality. So as I thought, what would I like to talk about? I wanted to bring this up. The need is there. The land needs management desperately. The number of natural disturbance events seems to be on the upswing. Climate change is now a constant. So those are given. The land, the need is there, and if we can get people interested, engaged, and trained, there's a lot of potential. So I move on. I wanted to mention that these are kind of important as we get started. Invasive species, definitely a matter of perspective. Poison ivy is a native plant. It can certainly be invasive. It's a native, it's great for birds, but it will change your world for a week or two if you thrash around in it. I don't manage it, because my perspective is that it's a native, it's doing its thing, it has its place. I work around it. I work around it a lot. So that's just an example of perspective. Some people have said the invasives aren't really invasive, they're more inconvenient. So I get that. Natural systems follow their own timelines. Our calendar it works for us, but the trees and the plants and the bushes and the grasses and the weeds, they're on their own system, and we are welcome to bring our viewpoints, but they're going to do what they do. So we have to kind of realize that and make sure we're thinking long term. That's my argument. One size fits all, not really a good fit in the world of landscape management. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. It's a very nuanced thing that I do. I know people that garden, work the lands, manage natural systems. You got to figure out what energies to bring to bear to fit the need in that place. Are there any questions there, Paul, at this point? We're looking good? Okay. So I'd like to jump into present day. This is where I find us. I'm not going to dwell here. I don't want to preach or bore anybody. I'm just going to say our present day best management practices look like this. I'm going to take you through a few slides. Look at this one. This is a roadside. You see the guardrail. There's a brook in the background. Across the brook, you see standing trees, and you see a brown edge. You see a hayfield, but you see a brown edge. That's because several days prior, this stream side was sprayed with herbicide to control Japanese knotweed. If you look at the picture, it also says June 4th. Now, I'm not allowed to give chemical advice. I have legal restrictions on that. But every conference I've ever been to says you don't manage this particular species in early June. So here's an example of wrongly applied chemical treatment. And I drive this area often enough to tell you there has been no follow-up at this site. And the knotweed, well, here's the next slide. The knotweed comes back in short order. So here's 2016, Royalton, Vermont, 200 meters from my house. The railroad has a need to keep the rail lines clear, so they spray what's called soil sterilant. They spray this in an effort to control Japanese knotweed, anything getting into the rail ballast and anything that would interfere with sight lines and human safety. So that's a valid need, I get that. And again, you look at, this was taken about 10 days after they sprayed. So they did early June again, sprayed the rail corridor in 2016. In 2020, the knotweed is back. There's honeysuckle in there. And we're right back to where we started, except now that there's I would argue there's a little bit of a toxic chemical legacy in this soil. I don't know for this presentation, I've looked it up in the past. I don't know what soil sterilant is. I can't tell you that right now, but it sounds powerful, and I'm sure it has a pretty strong, hardcore effect. It didn't kill everything in this photo. There's the telephone pole, and there's the poles again. The knotweed looks a little weak in the front of this patch. It's 10 feet tall in the back, and it gets mowed a little bit. There's mailboxes down the road there. I don't know, do I have a pointer? There's mailboxes down the road. They got to keep that clear. So the Japanese knotweed is back. It's 4 years later. What is the railroad supposed to do now? Well, they're going to come through and spray again. So that's like an endless cycle of, we're not getting anywhere. What are we doing? We're keeping the status quo. That's our best management practice. And I say it's flawed, broken, and dysfunctional. And we can do better. So kind of in a nutshell, what I just showed you was this is what we do now in most areas, most states. Our goal is kill and remove, get them out of sight, get them out of the way, let us do our work. We, at the same time, fail to find any use for the resources, and that's what I'm calling weeds. I'm calling invasive species a resource, not necessarily an inconvenience. But we fail to think about what we could do with them. We fail the unintended consequences test. Ask me what that's about. I'm going to say to you, who enjoys eating fiddlehead ferns as a delicacy in the month of May as the fiddleheads are first coming in along the New England riverbanks? That's something we harvest aggressively. It's a native species, and everywhere I hear people talk about it, we harvest sustainably. They say that in the restaurant, on the menu or on the website. What does that mean? We harvest sustainably. Does anyone check to prove that? Do we get, it's not, I've never seen organic and non-organic fiddlehead ostrich fern offerings. But does anybody go out and check to see if the fiddlehead ferns are harvested sustainably? I can think of several places that are not. And what happens when you over harvest fiddlehead ferns to put them in a fancy restaurant and we all enjoy our specialty dish? What happens is Japanese knotweed comes in. Since there's no more ferns, the knotweed comes in aggressively and takes over the space. I'll argue here, I think I just took the Japanese knotweed crisp out of the oven. We're gonna, I know you all don't, you can't even smell the aroma through the screen, but I just made some. I'm a little concerned because I think it's gonna be kind of on the woody side. You make your Japanese knotweed dishes like in May when the shoots are soft and tender. And I researched hard this morning for soft, tender shoots. I've been working areas And I think just August is a little bit late. So I may have to, here, I'll do this for you. This is my beverage tonight. This is my water, and this is my Japanese knotweed straw. So I'm not using plastic anymore. Got some water there. Japanese knotweed straws, I would say we got to be careful with those, but we haven't done well with the straws made of plastic that are now all over the ocean. So just wanted to demonstrate that. Unintended consequences. Yes, hammer the fiddleheads, put them in the restaurants, and here comes Japanese knotweed. What do? We freak out and don't know what to do. I say the final 2 points here are that we fail to think through in managing our landscapes. We fail to really think long term, get the transition piece right. We need to be planting native species and fostering native maple trees, silver maples, and basswoods in the places we're trying to reclaim from aggressive invasive plant species. And when we do that, when we think about transitioning, since it's a long-term operation, that's where we get the opportunity to grow future stewards of the landscape. It doesn't matter, young people, retirees, students, visitors, doesn't matter, recreation world. These are the people that can steward landscapes if they know how to do it safely. And that's where the whole partnership world can blossom. I'll talk about that some more later. But I think that's important. I really think if we don't grow stewards and partnerships, we're failing. If you're in Massachusetts, you have Japanese stiltgrass. You have very little of that yet in Vermont. If you build stewardship and if you build partnerships, people learn to recognize Japanese stiltgrass and see its advance and recognize it and stop it before it takes over, a treasured space or a really popular forest path. I was just in New York, just over the border a bit, and sure enough, they have Japanese stiltgrass there. Biosecurity, a big deal. I'm still on the what are we doing nowadays? What can we do with it? Or is that, I don't know, that's from 2014 perhaps. That pile got burned and it's now in the atmosphere. And did we make soil? No, we didn't. Because our practice is to just clear that land, burn it off, get it out of the way, make it disappear. I could have made that pile disappear. I could have tucked it in. That's a big pile. It would have taken, I would have been happy to use the bulldozer too, but they could have done better with that. And they could have just let it sit and keep it wet and just let it decompose. Yes, it would off gas. It would add some carbon dioxide, but it would also build soil. And it would serve as a matrix for bacteria and fungi and all the things we need, because that land, it might look pretty good, but I guarantee it's deficient in a lot of ways. So that's what we do. If we don't like vegetation, we burn it off, and that's a missed opportunity. So here we go, new approach. I pretty much have covered this. If we start viewing our water and our vegetation as a resource, we could look at it differently. And I've said this work is good work, outdoor work, composting, gardening, farming, rehabilitating landscapes. Could prisoners do that work? I say they could. I say there's no reason why you couldn't do this work as part of your rehabilitation. You can do it. You can do it under heavy guard. You can do it in leg shackles. And you may discover that you like the work, and you may actually, I say that there's no reason that people who are in a desperate place could not discover something about themselves and could become contributing members of society again. Yet we stick them in places where we don't want to see them, and we just leave them there forever. So I'm serious about the human condition piece. We could get more people engaged, but we choose not to. Global warming. We could certainly do better with managing vegetation, because anytime anything breaks down, whether it's eaten by a cow or whether it's burned or whether it's left to decompose, it's going to off gas. But if we can get as much benefit out of that as possible, we can reduce demand in other realms, and we can address some of our needs effectively. I'll again pause in case there's a question. That was a little bit of philosophy. Are we good, Paul? Okay. So we'll shift here. get my beverage going here again. Let's make bread and pizza. So here we go. That's a under construction, and that's just a month old, the photo. So this is in South Burlington, Vermont. I'm not going to talk about potential partners and things lining up, and it is public land, but I just want to say there is an opportunity here to build community. This is public space, a pizza oven, food. People love food. Wow. Gathering when we can do that safely. But this pizza oven, bread oven, this wonderful structure is going to need a fuel source. So if you look behind there, all of that landscape is public land. So I'm not going to really go into too much detail here because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to overpromise or get ahead of myself. But that's the next slide. Remember the pizza oven. I'm getting hungry. I need to get that fire started. Common buckthorn makes really good firewood. So here's a photo of a colleague who helped me one time manage common buckthorn. She made one bucky stake there. You can see the one with the fork on it by her knee. That's a buckthorn garden stake with a fork. So that's rot resistant for the garden, but the other two poles get bucked up to act as firewood. So that's it right there. Is there risk in this work in harvesting buckthorn for firewood? Yes, there is. That's why I use, and she used in this case, a Felco pruning saw, sharp tool. Sure, it's dangerous, but it's not a chainsaw. So I think if you go back and you look at this vision here and what are they going to do, and if they get community members going out to look for firewood sources, we need to do that safely. We can go manage our invasive species and harvest out common buckthorn and buck it up for firewood and use it on site. Brilliant. How much transportation is involved? Zero. No transporting it 500 miles to burn it. It's such a good fit for that community pizza oven. But we have to do it safely. So if we do it, if we harvest locally, it'll be without chainsaws, it'll be safety first, and it'll be local people power. I'm sure it's going to make great pizza. So I mentioned partnership opportunities without getting into too much detail. Buckthorn has about as much BTUs as somewhere between red maple and rock maple. So I burn it. It's good stuff. I mix it right in with my ash, oak, and maple, and hornbeam. Nothing's as good as hornbeam, for the record. Moving on, we need to grow the garden. So moving on from the pizza oven, I'm going to shift now to a use for buckthorn about relevant to the garden scenario. We want a fence. We want to source local. And of course, we want some garden stakes like the bucky stake that we saw previously. We want to prop up the veg. So here's a starter, an existing garden. I cannot take credit for that. Again, I am being hosted, and that's wonderful. So what a proud garden. I'll just explain this photo for a second. You have a garden in there with a little woodchuck fence, a step-over fence, a weed drying station in the background under the apple tree. So that's how we manage weeds at this location. They all go on the pallets and they get air dried. Sun hits that spot, they get air dried for a summer, freeze dried through the winter, and then that material can be used again as mulch in the same garden. So there you go. That's a very cyclical use of vegetative material. No trips to the dump, no bags, no transportation, no 40-mile drives. It's simply keeping it all on site and using the material. So what we want to do here is expand this garden in the direction of the stakes. I have some buckthorn stake poles there to the left, just kind of leaned in a tripod. And I thought this was a really neat piece of yellow birch. So that's not actually buckthorn, but we'll weave in a few. I cut that. I had to cut it for some reason. We'll weave in a few things in addition to buckthorn, but here I am a day or two later making, weaving the beginnings of a wattle fence. There is some grapevine in there. When you pull out, when you cut and when you stump cut and try to pull buckthorn down out of all the other trees that it's into, the hornbeam and the basswood and the ash, you'll tend to get the occasional grapevine pulls out with it. So rather than let that grapevine go to waste, we used it to strengthen the corners of the wattle fence. I try not to use withy and wattle too interchangeably. A withy fence is, the definition really refers to things made of willow or that kind of family. So a withy fence is a woven fence, certainly, but it tends to be made of willow materials. A wattle fence is any material that you can weave loosely, like I've been doing here, or you can certainly just look that up online and you can get plenty of visuals. I tried to look it up online, and I got a lot of big box companies and chain link fence, and it was not as easy a search as I thought it would be. But have at it. So there I am pondering. I've turned a corner there right in front of me is a corner. I've done some initial weave. I'm happy with it. It's not a step over everywhere. These are just some photos to let you see different segments or sections or panels of the fence. Tension is holding it in. We're using older material for the stakes, and then new and older material for the weave. And obviously, the fresher stuff weaves a little more easily. The grapevine's not a problem, but people have asked me about resprout, and I've said, hey, I've never seen a buckthorn resprout. I don't cut them and then stick it in the ground the same day. I prepare them, put them in my barn for a year, let them dry, and then I use dry buckthorn for garden stakes and for fence post corners. So that shows you a little bit of what's in the fence. You got your stakes and you've got your weave material. You can get some nice 16-foot runs of material from common buckthorn. I want to mention in the photo with the house in the background, you see a panel there in the background, and you see some Blau Emmer wheat that we planted a handful of seeds in the garden this summer, and they are most impressive. That's a stalk, and there's a few seed heads there. So nice, very nice to see that. We used a bucky stake to even prop the wheat against falling over and breaking. Here's just another shot of the corner of the garden. This is looking towards the area of expansion. So this is the existing garden. I thought it would be useful to see I put the stakes in first. The stakes have wiggle. The stakes, whether they're in the garden or on the fence, I like to leave a fork at the top, or even make it look like a walking stick or a Gandalf staff or whatever. I like to leave all that at the top because you always want to tie stuff on or loop the grapevine through there, or just hang anything from that. So you can be creative with buckthorn stakes. They can be 8 feet tall or 2 feet tall, and you can certainly put a little walkway gate in your somewhere in the design. So that's what the little side notes say there. You can build it as fast as you want. It's kind of an ongoing project. Add in, strengthen as you need. You may need. I don't think this fence is going to stop skinny woodchucks, or maybe any woodchucks for that matter. But you can reinforce with chicken wire or whatever you need, and just keep adding to the fence over time, because you're going to have more buckthorn coming. And if you persist in pursuing the buckthorn, wearing it down, starving it out, you'll triumph there, and you'll have a fence at the end of that work. All good, all positives. I mentioned gateways and stepovers. And really, you work with what you have. If you have some vine material, you work with it. If you really wanted to make this fence stop anything in its tracks, I suppose you could weave in some multiflora rows. I wouldn't do that, and I certainly don't want to be I have no plans to do that, but that would add a scratch factor to the fence, which we don't want here. So any material, and we're not using anything from below ground. This is all above ground cut. My method, it's detailed in the summer issue of The Natural Farmer, how I manage um, shrub species, how I cut them off at waist height and just keep denying photosynthesis to them. So if you've not read The Natural Farmer, maybe you haven't had time, but dive into that and see some more on the methodology there. I love that magazine. Great, amazing set of articles in the summer issue.
Hey, Mike.
This landowner built a wattle fence, came up with a completely different design. And I love, she's got a gate there. The posts, those may be cedar posts, but steel, it looks like there's a spring. That's a gate on her walkway. I think it's great. Had a design, went with what was available, and she built that backyard fence. I think it's brilliant. I'm shifting now from the garden to actually eating the invasives. So a delicious display there of knotweed tarts. I did not make those. Those were served last summer. They were served to the volunteers doing knotweed work over in Lyme, New Hampshire. There's some folks are doing great work in the Albany area managing autumn olive, and 5-gallon buckets full of berries. And then they made jam. And they're still harvesting and they're still stressing. They're trying to eliminate the species. Autumn olive is an invasive shrub species. They're trying to reclaim some space, open it up to a community garden, and rehabilitate the soil at the same time. So in the process of getting rid of the autumn olive, pressuring it, reducing it, eliminating it from that local site, they're harvesting the berries. I hope it was delicious. I'm hoping that they can make some money and sell that jam. That was good. And they got 5-gallon buckets full of berries. A lot of bushes there. So there you go. You sell the jam, small profit, feed it back into the control work. Everyone loves, or maybe if you have not heard of, garlic mustard pesto, but those recipes are online. The knotweed crisp and tarts and crunch bars, I think it's great that there are all of those options out there. I've had the crunch bars last May. There was no sweetener, and they were amazing. I have the recipe. I think I referenced that later. Crisp, just like apple crisp, swap out the apples, or you do a mix. Again, I think it's a springtime. I think my crisp is going to be a little on the woody, chewy side. We'll see. I'm going to eat it. Absolutely, I'm sworn to that. It may just be good high in fiber. The tarts look really good. Looks like there may be some apple in there mixed, but I can pass on recipes, and we can certainly all share amongst ourselves. I think, yeah, here's what I suggest. You find such great recipes. You just talk to people at the conference, and you read the newsletters and The Natural Farmer, and you get these brilliant recipe suggestions. So I know it's people, sharing is important. We all do it, and I'd love if we could do it more, but the invasive species, please look at them as a resource. Be careful with them, and if you don't eat it all, you've cooked it, but don't get sloppy with anything you don't cook, and don't feel like you can just toss something in the compost pile. Garlic mustard does not compost well. It's a survivor. Japanese knotweed, I don't know that anyone uses goutweed or bishop's weed. I don't know. I'm not recommending that one for consumption, but you don't compost that. That one, weed drying station, and do not let it recover once you put it on the weed drying station. That might be one that gets a flaming torch once it's out of the ground. So I always mention to people, avoid the sugar, because we've got maple syrup and we've got honey, and I'm not tooting the horn for this particular farm, but this is an organic farm, here in Vermont, and we just purchased a jar of knotweed honey. So love that. Support organic. Support people doing good work and making something from the resource. Japanese knotweed is good for honey, is good for pollinators. That's not a reason to keep the Japanese knotweed, because other things would be there as well if the knotweed was pressured out. Goldenrod, you can say goldenrod's an invasive species. People love honey. That's also a nectar resource. So please don't start a knotweed patch to make honey, but if you have one, you can certainly draw from it while you're controlling it, just like the buckthorn. So those are some resources. I want to just check the time. Okay, I think we're doing well. I wanted to put this example of some wine goblets. This is common buckthorn again. I wanted to put this photo in with the opportunity slide. Basically, buckthorn and maybe one or two other invasive species are pretty good for carving and for wood turning. And I've thought, I'm not going to make goblets myself, but I gave this wood to a fellow here in Vermont, and he carved those. I've actually advised a guy and consulted with a guy making pipes for bagpipes. And my goal is to someday I'm going to make a rolling pin out of buckthorn. I just think, put it on the lathe, turn it, and off we go. I think that's going to be a good thing. It's got beautiful grain. It's a really strong wood. That will dull a blade, no doubt. Buckthorn, carving wood, firewood, bucky stakes, wattle fences, a great resource, no reason to burn it. Goats will graze it. Goats, I think, is the other world that we're not really exploring. Goats graze. They like to eat at shoulder height, whereas the sheep like to graze low down at the ankles. So goats will graze off a lot of invasive species. They'll hit poison ivy, which we've talked about. They will go after natives like oak, poison ivy, sumac. But goats will also hammer buckthorn, hammer chervil, and certainly go after bittersweet, Japanese knotweed. I've seen them keep Japanese knotweed below knee height. That's where they keep it. And I've even seen a presentation where they went after Phragmites, the great big tall reed. They like it when it's small and juicy. Goats love multiflora rose too. So that thorny stuff with toxins and so forth, irritants, goats are on it. They love it juicy, and they need a diverse diet. So I'm not saying that goat grazing is a simple task. It's not, but we need more people doing it, and the opportunity is out there. The goblets are one of the creative pursuits. I hope. The one thing I did not do in this presentation, this is Japanese knotweed paper. I didn't want to do that as part of this presentation because I still want to do that at the conference. I'm not going to hold it in front of me here for much longer, but it's got beautiful grain and it's just amazing paper. I want to make that at a summer conference with people helping me out, doing it as a team effort. I didn't think this would be a very exciting meeting to watch me stir a pot for the whole time. So we'll get people screening and stirring and chopping and slicing and dicing, and we'll do that as a cooperative effort at a conference someday. I'm looking forward to that. So creative pursuits, they are plenty. There are people making paper and beautiful decorative mounting dried plant material and making cards out of it and so forth. I submit, if we can make paper, can we not make packaging? And why could we not make insulation? I mean, it's just cellulose, right? I insulated my house with cotton denim insulation, but I had to get it from Arizona because there's only one or two distributors in Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire. And I thought that was really odd that I have to go to the hottest part of the country to bring insulation to one of the coldest parts of the country. That made no sense to me. I haven't acted on it, but I submit that with all the things we have here, Phragmites, Japanese knotweed, the grassier invasives, we should be making insulation. Treat it, make it fireproof, and off we go. I know that maybe I'm oversimplifying. Soil health, any number of opportunities to boost soil health, and mostly I'm thinking organic matter, percent organic matter, but just stop burning and just restore our fungi and just recover a little bit of that boost our low organic matter numbers. That doesn't necessarily have to be on the farm. That could be. Well, I do think you could make windrows of cut material on a farm and just let it compress and compact, and maybe turn it and keep it wet and just let it decompose over a couple of years and sell it off as topsoil locally. Get that right, but we could certainly create soil and use it locally with local community hubs. There's a model for that. I want to talk a little bit about payment for ecosystem services. I think it's an opportunity, probably going back to the goats, but that's a hot topic nowadays. How do we get money into the hands of landowners to manage, to do positive for ecosystems? So rights of way, is that the next slide? Yeah, infrastructure and rights of way. There's a power line in this picture. It's above the road. The road is there's a right of way for the road, rights of way for power. Rail line is a right of way. The road is infrastructure, and so is the standpipe there, because there are structures nearby. So that's fire. That's protection. That's human safety. So you've got a stream channel there, a waterway. You can see that it's eroding. You can also see to the left across the brook, there's a pile of slash, just cut material. The landowner burned that off a week or two later, and I see thousands and thousands of brush piles. So I didn't have time to stop and ask this person, but why would you not use that material right there? Stabilize that bank. None of us have permission to go in and re-engineer stream banks. I'm not saying that, but stream channels are dynamic. They come and go. Oftentimes we use riprap, and we try to straighten and narrow our channels, straighten them out, make them behave. But rivers and streams need to breathe. They need to come up and release some energy. And oftentimes vegetation can be part of vegetation, beavers. It's a very dynamic situation, but all of this protection we do of infrastructure, we could do it better, and we could look at vegetation as a resource rather than burning it. And why not pay the landowner for that resource? I say the same thing with grazing under power line corridors. We should be using power corridors to raise certain plants and keep the vegetation to a certain height, and we should be paying farmers and basically anyone with grazing animals to do that work. Instead, we tend to spray and put a lot of energy into cutting. Think about how much money goes into a chainsaw crew. You can't do it alone. So you've got 2 or 3 people running chainsaws, running gas for a day. And you could do the same work with goats and grazing animals. I've talked about producing firewood and creating soil. Medicinals. Burdock is invasive. It's not native. Japanese knotweed. Many of us are addressing the Lyme disease situation or threat, or we are dealing with it personally. Japanese knotweed is one protocol. First, I want to say thank you to everyone that's exploring that, pursuing that. I know that shows up at the NOFA conference, and people are doing good work. I wish that got more attention. Lyme disease is a big deal. Please continue to take it seriously. I know pretty much everyone here does. I'll move on. I think, yeah. Read this slide here. Time for an evening snack. Japanese knotweed crisp. I was able to pull it off and make it. It was harvested today. It's going to be yummy. Like I said, it might be a little heavy on the fiber. And yes, I'm supposed to insert a photo before I eat it. So I've got to go take a picture. I won't step away. Um, I've got my Japanese knotweed crisp. I'm going to take a picture. I'm going to eat it. And I'm going to certainly share my photo next time I see you all at conference. I'm very excited, as you can tell. So I'm to my thank you slide. I want to say, I want to put this little message out there: support those who manage landscapes and water resources in an ecologically responsible manner. So I think that's important because the difference makers are the King Arthur flowers that I do some work on their property, and I know they put a lot of energy and money into making sure the water that leaves their property is cleaner than the water that came on. Could they do better? I'm sure they could, but I know they're trying. They also hire me to manage 6 invasive species without use. I'm used their flower in the knotweed crisp, and I'm certainly a fan of this farm that made the knotweed honey. I'm certainly a fan of you all doing the organic thing. I just want to make sure that invasive species are part of the conversation, and I know they can be inconvenient, but do the good work you're doing and support our companies and our businesses and nonprofits that are the true difference makers. There's my email. I think I can stop here because we probably have a few questions. The website, that's the company name, Got Weeds, Get Mike. You can find me online. Certainly send your questions. If you have photos that you want to send and have me diagnose something, I can send that ahead to my smart people, and we'll figure out what you got going on, and we'll get you some input, some thoughts, if not some answers. So thank you. Email questions, or I'll ask Paul to do the host thing and direct them to me now. Thank you for participating. Thank you, Paul.
Great. Thanks, Mike. One question, I don't know if you can hear me any better, but one question about drying.
I'm gonna have to come real close, Paul, so I can hear you. One sec. Go ahead.
Okay. Russ wanted to know about drying for wood, buckthorn. Does it take a lot of time to cure before you can dry it, or before you can burn it?
Okay. Yeah, I'm losing the volume, but I got the question. Treat buckthorn the same as you would any regular firewood. It just depends on, you can see, I've seen it 8 inches diameter, sadly, and I've seen it 1 inch. So you can use it for kindling, and you can use it for starter sticks, and you can use it as logs. The drying time, this is a good question. I tend to aggressively go after buckthorn in the spring so I can stress that bush and stop seed production, because they may not be dead and they'll rebuild their frame, but they don't have enough energy to berry, to fruit. So anything you do in the spring is a positive, not just for harvesting some wood, but you're breaking the seed cycle. That's huge. Then I go out in the fall again and I follow up. I'll break off any resprouts, but I'll just continue working on mature plant and setting the stage for next year. So anything I harvest in the spring, my diameters tend to be 3 inches or less. I get them into the barn, or I put them on pallets and I just let them cure, and I kind of judge things by weight. I think the big thing with curing is, I don't always get around to it, but you really do have to buck things up. You don't necessarily have to split wood, and I've never split buckthorn. It never gets that big. But you certainly have to cut it down to size, either double